Vabbè, dai, comunque si fa.
Va bene, li faccio entrare allora,
Sì?
e ti do lo status di amministratore,
Mhm.
così puoi chiudere e fare quello che vuoi.
Vabbè, dai, comunque si fa.
Va bene, li faccio entrare allora,
Sì?
E ti do lo status di... Era partito lo streaming. Allora, altro, assegna coorganizzatore. Ok, adesso sei diventata coorganizzatore. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Morning, yes.
I need some feedback from you, okay? And today the seminar will be held by Dr. Laura Grechi, that is an environmental engineer that has graduated with us and now is working at the Regional Agency for the Protection of the Environment. So she is really in the field. The lecture of Laura will be about ecosystem services, and in particular the application of this quite a new concept onto a project that we have implemented into the Lagoon of Venice, the Vimine project. And so Laura will describe us how we may employ this important concept, ecosystem services, for evaluating the status and the quality of the environment in terms of the services provided by the environment to humankind. Ok, Laura, se vuoi...
Inizio. Grazie, Luca.
Oh, bravissima. Thank you very much, Laura. Please, it is your turn now.
Okay, grazie. Thank you, Luca. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be with you today to give this brief seminar that will last about 1 hour. First, let me introduce myself. I am Laura Grechi. I graduated about 7 years ago from the University of Padova. I am an environmental engineer. I did my master thesis with Professor Palmeri. And then I worked with him as a research fellow for about 4 years in the Live Vimine project. That was an European project coordinated by Professor Palmeri and his group. So today I'm going to talk about what I have learned during my research fellowship experience and what I have learned in the European project Live Vimine. In particular, I was involved in the cost-benefit analysis of the project. So I will explain you how we did the cost-benefit analysis and why we decided to use the ecosystem services approach. So let me share the presentation with you. This is the title of the lecture of today, Ecosystem Services ES Valuation for use in cost-benefit analysis of conservation projects. We will see some background information, some theoric information on ecosystem services. Then we will see the case study of the Live Vimine project. So how we apply the theory of the ecosystem services approach to a real case study. What makes this lecture interesting for you as a future environmental engineer? Well, suppose that we have a project dealing with nature conservation. For example, a forest conservation project, a river restoration project, or a water quality preservation project. You, as an environmental engineer, will have to do most of time you will need to demonstrate the sustainability of the project, in particular in the environmental world, because it is not so simple to obtain funding or approval for nature conservation projects. So most of the time we need to demonstrate the sustainability of a project. And one of one of the commonly used method of valuing a project is the cost-benefit analysis. So recently, the global environmental problems have been framed in economic terms and been approached with the cost-benefit analysis. So basically, we assess the costs, we assess the benefits, and of course, the benefits should be greater than the cost in order to be, to the project to be sustainable. We will see how it is possible to evaluate the benefits with the ecosystem services economic valuation. So this is the main focus of the lecture. The program of today is, as I told you, a brief definition of ecosystem services and their classifications. Then we will see why it is important to evaluate in an economic way the ecosystem services. We will see the important paper of Costanza that changes the concept of that introduced the natural capital concept. And
mi scusi, noi non vediamo la presentazione. Non so se...
si vede, ok. Allora vediamo di...
Infatti,
Grazie.
la condivisione non si vede la presentazione. Vediamo un po'.
Vediamo un
Se
attimo.
riesce a condividere.
Ah, perché forse stavo condividendo solo... Vediamo, Ok, adesso vedete?
Adesso si vede, sì.
Ok.
Sì, grazie.
Grazie a voi. Ok, so... Okay, so this is the cost-benefit analysis that I told you. Okay, the basic formula. After a brief theoric introduction about the ecosystem services, we will see the case study. So what we did in LiveMine project, and how we decided to approach to the cost-benefit analysis of the project. First of all, to put it simply, let's give the definition of ecosystem services. This is the common and most used definition. So ecosystem services are the benefits that people obtain from ecosystem. It is a very, very simple definition that was communicated by the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. That was an international research project ended in 2005. This research project has had the objective of assess the consequences of ecosystem changes for human well-being. So for the first time, they define yes, they say, okay, the benefit, the ecosystems can give benefits to people and to humankind, and these benefits, we decide to call this benefit ecosystem services. These are this is an example of ecosystem services of a forest. For example, a forest can give us air pollution reduction, soil formation, or recreational opportunities. A forest can give us timber or greenhouse gases reduction or biodiversity protection. All these are ecosystem services that a forest can give us. This concept is very utilitarian. So it is a concept anthropocentric because as an environmental engineer, we should understand that it is a concept that it is utilitarian because we say, okay, we protect the nature, the environment only because we need it. But as environmental engineer, we should understand that this concept gives us new additional arguments to address the environmental protection. So we should use it in our evaluation and in our project. And then this concept brings for the first time a link between ecology and socioeconomic sciences. So it is very, very interesting. A little bit of history. Let's talk about the origins of the concept of ecosystem services. Schumacher and Westman were the first authors that used the concept of natural capital in the 80s. And then in the 90s, the ES concept entered the policy arena with a clear economic connotation, with these three most important documents that are this article, this paper of Costanza, The Value of World's Ecosystem Services and Natural Capital. Then we have a document of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, that is, this research project ended in 2005. And then we have the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity. These are the three most important documents that I suggest you to read to better understand the ecosystem services world. So today, the ecosystem services concept is one of the most discussed and developed subject, both in ecology, but also in environmental economy. And we have thousands of studies and publications. Moreover, many environmental agency and international subjects, such as European Commissions, UK Environmental Agency, and so on, promote the application of this approach. But we still have quite a few challenges in this area. For example, we should work on the increase of citizen awareness. We should work on the scientific research to better quantify and evaluate ecosystem services. We should work to better integrate economic and ecological science. And most of all, we should integrate ecosystem services value in policy decision. So today, there is too much talk and too little successful execution on this topic. Okay, let's give you a little bit of theory to better analyze the great number of ecosystem services that offered by natural capital, natural ecosystem. There is a classification that has been made by the Millennium Assessment project. So basically, you will see most of times this classification in which the ecosystem services are divided based on their function. So we have provisioning services, supporting services, regulating services, and cultural one. The provisioning services are all the material benefits that people obtain from ecosystems. For example, the food. Virtually all ecosystems provide the condition for growing, collecting, hunting, harvesting food. Raw materials, the timber of the forest, for example. Fresh water. No water, no life. Ecosystems play a vital role in providing the flow and storage of fresh water. And also we can have the plants and the mushroom which offer effective cures for many kinds of problems of the humankind. Then we have regulating services. That is another class. The regulating services are the services that ecosystem provide by acting as a regulator. So they are often invisible and therefore mostly taken for granted. When they are damaged, they result in losses and can be substantial and difficult to restore. For example, climate regulation, flood regulation, water purification, all these are ecosystem services that can be classified as regulating services. And these are other examples. Local climate air quality, carbon sequestration and storage, moderation of extreme events, wastewater treatment, erosion prevention, pollination, biological control, regulation of water flow. Regulating services. Then we have supporting services that are all the services that through these supporting services, the ecosystems provide everything that an individual plant or animal need to survive. For example, the habitat for species, the genetic diversity maintenance. Then we have the cultural services that are the non-material benefits that people obtain from ecosystems. For example, recreational and mental health, tourism, and also aesthetic appreciation and inspiration for culture, art, and design. This is one type of classification of ecosystem services, the most used. But we have also another common international classification of ecosystem services. That is the one that we used for the evaluation in the LIFE project. Basically, this classification incorporates the supporting services into the regulating one. Okay, after this brief overview on the ecosystem services definition and classification, now we move on to the key aspect of the lecture, that is the economic evaluation of ecosystem services. You can see in this picture a graph that represents the number of references to ecosystem services in the scientific papers. You can see an increase of citation from 1997. What happened in this year? In 1997, an important paper was published by Costanza and other scientists, This paper was, the title of this paper was The Value of the World's Ecosystem Services and the Natural Capital. It, by now, it has almost 15,000 of citations. It is a very, very important paper that you should read as an environmental engineer. And basically, in this paper, Costanza and his friend considered 17 ecosystem services produced by all the ecosystems in the world. For each ecosystem service, they estimated an economic value. Okay, so for soil formation, they estimated a value, recreation, they estimated a value, and so on. Many of the evaluation techniques used in this study are based on willingness to pay of individuals for ecosystem services. So then we will see what willingness to pay is. But it is important, the concept that this is not a total value, but it is a marginal value. So this is associated to a variation of the quantity of ecosystem services. So it is not an absolute value of all the ecosystem services of the world, but it is associated to the variation of the ecosystems in the world. This was a controversial paper, very controversial, because you can imagine they put a value on nature, so there were a lot of doubts. But the methods used in this paper and the results began to spread the importance of ecosystem services and of the economic valuation of these services. So basically, Costanza, with this paper, moved from a problem that is the increasing loss of ecosystems. Okay, during the past years, we have a decreasing in most of ecosystems of the world. Costanza said that this problem, this loss of ecosystems, is caused by an insufficient attention to the ecosystem services when public and private decisions are taken. So, why there is no attention to the environment in decision making? Because ecosystem services are not fully captured in commercial market. They are often given little weight in policy decision. So the solution that Costanza proposed is this: we must quantify and evaluate ecosystem services in monetary terms to better integrate the environmental issues in public and private decision making. So if we are able to give a monetary value to environment, maybe this during decision making, the environment will be will have attention. Okay, this is the concept. Now we will see the classic overview diagram called cascade model. That is the classical diagram used to explain the role of ecosystem services valuation. For example, we have the ecosystems and the biodiversity world. We have a biophysical structure or a process, for example, the plants that capture carbon. Then we have a function, for example, the carbon sequestration in this case. This service is climate regulation. This is the ecosystem service of the plants, in this case, for example, of a forest, that capture carbon, and then we give us this service that is climate regulation. This service gives to the human well-being a benefit that is, or more benefits that are agricultural productivity, human health, and so on. These benefits can be evaluated in an economic way with a method that, for example, can be the social cost of carbon. That is the avoid damage cost of 1 ton of CO2 emitted. We have the institution and the human judgment that can also influence both the ecosystems, because through management, through restoration, and also the institution can influence the human well-being. For example, in manage the perception and the use of ecosystem services. Now we see the different type of valuation techniques that are displayed in this chart. So we have the direct market valuation, and the non-market valuation methods. So these are all the methods that can be used to give a monetary value to an ecosystem service. The choice of the valuation technique depends on the type and the quantity of available data. So the direct market valuation is one of the methods used is the market price. This is a direct valuation method. The market price, for example, we have a forest that produces timber. We can evaluate this ecosystem service by considering the market value of the timber. So we can evaluate the forest and the ecosystem services of a forest by giving a market price to the goods that are produced by the ecosystem. Then we have other two methods that are the avoided cost method and the replacement cost method. The avoided cost method is a method that considers the damage caused by the absence of the services. For example, let's suppose to have a forest and that protect our village, our house from flooding. The value of this forest can be assessed by considering the cost of the damages produced by the flooding. And the replacement cost is the cost to replace the service if nature didn't provide it. Then we have the production function that is, for example, how much money would be lost because of the change in the production of a market good. So the restoration, for example, of a mangrove ecosystem can increase fish abundance. So this increase can be measured, can be valued by the related values of the catch. These are direct valuation methods. Then we have another method that is the reveal preference, that is based on individuals' choices in the real world. So, for example, we have the travel cost method, the hedonic price, the factor income. Through these methods, we give an economic value to the ecosystems by assessing the observed individual's choice in the real world. For example, how much do people pay to reach the ecosystem, the place, the ecosystem? How much does the surrounding network make the house prices increase? How much money is the community benefiting due to the natural attractiveness, and so on. So this is based on the real world, real travel cost, real prices of the houses, real factor income, while the state preference methods are based on hypothetical scenarios. For example, there is the contingent valuation method and the choice modeling. In the contingent valuation method, the respondents are asked to state their willingness to pay for the preservation of a given ecosystem or ecosystem services, or their willingness to accept to abandon a given services. The contingent valuation method is the one used in Live Vimine project. Then there is the last method that is the benefit transfer. If you don't have any data, you can use this method, that is the benefit transfer. Basically, you use values from previous studies, and you apply them to the context under examination. I can say that the results coming from these methods, from this particular method, the benefit transfer, are not so reliable. When I read, for example, a study based on the benefit transfer method, I said, oh, okay, this is a rushed work and not so reliable. So you use it if you don't have any data, if you have to do something in a rushed way. These are some tools to quantify and evaluate ecosystem services, some software, and but there is still largely it is still largely based on approximation and incomplete knowledge. So these are some software, some tools, but there is a little bit work, a little more work to do. Okay, now we move from theory to practice, and where and when we can use this valuation of ecosystem services. The ecosystem services valuation was required by the European Biodiversity Strategy. This was a strategy adopted by the European Commission to protect and improve the biodiversity in Europe. This strategy included 6 targets. The target 2 was on aimed for the restoration of the 15% of degraded ecosystems and the development of green infrastructure. Action 5 of the target 2 was on the mapping and assessment of ecosystem services and the economic value assessment and integration into accounting and reporting systems by 2020. Okay. Now that we are in 2020, we can say that European Commission missed most of its targets. So probably these objectives were ambitious. We can say that by the end of this year, new objectives are going to be defined for sure with the European Green Deal, and we will see what happens. Another use of ecosystem services valuation is to use it as a decision support tool in ecosystem management. So, for example, as environmental engineer, we should make cost-benefit analysis of environmental conservation project by using the ecosystem services valuation. We can use it also for the establishment of incentive or market-based mechanism, taxes, CO2 market, and so on. We can use the valuation to justify or set priorities for the public spending in the environmental conservation projects. And we can use ecosystem services valuation to consider the value of the public opinion and the citizen participation in environmental project. So, even if we have this kind of use of ecosystem services valuation, today the integration of the ecosystem services concept into decision making remain, however, challenging. Okay. Now we will see an example of the application for cost-benefit analysis in the Live Women project. So basically, as I said at the beginning, I worked for 4 years as a research fellow in the Live Women project. The Live Women project was an European project which aimed to define an integrated approach, a new integrated approach to the ecosystem management, and in particular to salt marshes management in the Lagoon of Venice, with the specific goal of protecting the most interior salt marshes of the northern Lagoon of Venice, protecting them from erosion. Okay, these are the salt marshes that are like little islands that are going to be eroded. So about 70% of the salt marshes of the Venice Lagoon have been lost during the last century because of erosion. And you can see the green areas that represents the salt marshes. And you can see that the green areas decreased from in 1 century. The Live Women project was a very complex project because it aimed at integrating 3 main objectives: the social, economic, and environmental one, with many activities and many actions. The focus was to protect these salt marshes from erosion, and basically we used the fascines that are wooden branches tied together with vegetable nets. Once installed near the edge of the saltmarsh, the space between the fascines and the edge is filled with sediments. So basically, these were the physical conservation works did in the Live Vimine project. Now, the cost-benefit analysis was necessary for Live Vimine project to demonstrate the sustainability of the project. This cost-benefit analysis was a powerful decision support tool in order to decide to continue or not the project itself. So the cost, basically we analyzed the cost to restore 1 hectare of saltmarsh with the Live Vimine approach, the cost of the fascines, the labor cost, the cost of the transport, and so on. And we decide to assess the benefit of the restoration of 1 hectare of saltmarsh using the ecosystem services approach. So the benefit of the restoration was assessed doing the sum of the values of ecosystem services provided by 1 hectare of restored saltmarsh. Of course, the project is sustainable if the benefit is greater than the cost. Now we see the evaluation procedure they did in the Live Vimine project. First of all, we identify those ecosystem services relevant for to the salt marshes of the Venice Lagoon. We identify the spatial and temporal scale of the service delivery. Then we identify the trend, so we did a qualitative analysis. We identify the trend increasing or decreasing of the ecosystem services quantity or value in relation to each project action. Then we did a quantitative analysis through modeling and also through a questionnaire that we attributed to the population of the Lagoon of Venice. And at the end, we did an economic valuation. So at the end, we came up with a monetary valuation of the ecosystem services delivered by 1 hectare of restored saltmarsh. So the identification of the ecosystem services, what are the provisioning services of the saltmarshes? What are the regulation and maintaining services? What are the cultural ones? We refer to the classification of sizes, and for the identification of all the ecosystem services, we consulted the experts from the Lagoon of Venice. So each ecosystem services has been discussed whether it is provided in the Lagoon of Venice or not. These were the results. Provisioning services, for example, food, fish, clan, birds. These are the provisioning services given by the saltmarshes of the Lagoon of Venice. The regulation and maintenance services. Saltmarshes give us air purification, climate regulation, water treatment, sediment flux regulation, coastal erosion prevention. life cycle maintenance, and biodiversity maintenance. Then we have cultural services. Saltmarshes give us recreation activities, navigation, ecotourism, recreational fishing, hunting, cultural heritage and identity, educational activities, and aesthetic information. So these are all the ecosystem services that, so the benefits that the salt marshes of the Lagoon of Venice can give to the society, and that were identified in the project. For all the Vimine, the project actions, we have been screened. All the Vimine actions have been screened for possible direct or indirect effects. So basically, we identify the trend, increasing or decreasing, of each ecosystem service for each project actions. So the effect, we identify the effect of the project action on the ecosystem service associated to the salt marshes. Then we did a quantitative analysis. So basically, we quantify with empirical research methods, so with models, these three ecosystem services: the climate regulation one, the water treatment, and the sediment flux regulation and coastal erosion prevention. All the other ecosystem services were quantified with a questionnaire, okay? So the water treatment ecosystem service was quantified with a nitrogen mass balance model. The quantification output was the yearly amount of nitrogen removed from water by 1 hectare of salt marsh. The sediment flux regulation and the protection from erosion of other salt marshes was quantified with the hydrodynamic model. The quantification output was the amount of sediment stocked by the salt marshes and the wave height reduction. The climate regulation service was quantified with a model that basically simulate the vertical accretion and the erosion of salt marshes and an organic carbon mass balance. This quantification output was for this model was the yearly amount of carbon sequestrated and stored by 1 hectare of restored salt marsh in the Lagoon of Venice. All other ecosystem services were quantified with a questionnaire-based survey. This was the output of the quantification, the survey-based quantification of the perceived importance and value of all the ecosystem services related to the salt marshes. This is the output. After the quantification, we move to the economic valuation of each ecosystem service associated to the salt marshes of the Lagoon of Venice. So the water treatment service was evaluated with the replacement cost method. So the water treatment cost in a wastewater treatment plant per kilogram of nitrogen removed was used to calculate the value of the service. And so on for the sediment flux regulation services and the protection from erosion. We use the replacement cost, we use the social cost of carbon for the climate regulation, and we use the contingent valuation method, the willingness to pay in particular the willingness to pay method, to evaluate all the other ecosystem services associated to the salt marshes. If we go into the details, we can see that for the nitrogen, for the ecosystem service that is the water treatment ecosystem services associated to the salt marshes of the lagoon, we use a model, a mass balance model of nitrogen. So a model with MATLAB based on a nitrogen mass balance among a salt marsh of the Northern Lagoon of Venice was developed, and the study confirmed the role of salt marshes in nitrogen removal processes. It was so the quantity of nitrogen removed from water by 1 square meter of salt marsh is about 30 grams per year. This is the result of the nitrogen mass balance model that was developed by Damiano Baldan. We define from literature a nitrogen abatement cost. That was the cost of the water treatment cost in a wastewater treatment plant. And the cost is about 10 euros per kilogram of nitrogen. We multiply this cost by the nitrogen that is calculated from the model, and the result is that 1 hectare of salt marsh can give us 2,700 euros per year in terms of replacement cost. So this is one of the main results from the modeling from this nitrogen mass balance model. Then we quantify also through an hydrodynamic model of the live beam in a project area. We simulate the effects of the salt marshes on the sediment flux and on the wave power acting on the other salt marshes or the other islands. The results were that the restoration of salt marsh habitats can locally reduce water velocity by 50% and wave height by up to 10 centimeters in the peak value. In turn, salt marshes also reduce the solid transport by about 20 kilograms per square meter per year. The evaluation method used to put an economic cost to this service was the replacement cost, so the cost related to maintaining the lagoon hydrodynamics and the island's banks. Then we use another modeling in order to quantify the carbon that is sequestered and stored by salt marshes. It was a mass balance model on CO2, and the result is that 1 square meter of restored salt marsh means about 160 grams of organic carbon per year stored and sequestered in the salt marsh. To put an economic value on this organic carbon that is stored and sequestered, we use the social price of carbon, that is the avoided damage cost of 1 ton of CO2 emitted. So the result is that the ecosystem service of carbon sequestration of the saltmarshes has a value of 250 euros per hectare per year. Then we use a questionnaire in order to quantify and evaluate all the other ecosystem services, a questionnaire that was distributed to the population of the Lagoon of Venice. In this questionnaire, respondents were asked to give a qualitative opinion on ecosystem services. So how important are the ecosystem services for the people, and also to evaluate them answering to the willingness to pay question. Basically, we asked to the people how much money or how much time they were willing to spend for the saltmarsh protection. This questionnaire was distributed before and after the project, and in order also to assess the improvements in the perception of the ecosystem service value. These are some data about the surveys, and these are the results. So the saltmarsh importance in monetary terms was measured as respondents' willingness to pay for funding saltmarsh restoration. These are the results based on the surveys conducted in 2015 and 2017. We have the average willingness to pay for saltmarsh restoration, that is about 10 euros per year for residents and 13 euros per year for tourists. Then we upscale the respondents' willingness to pay, and we came up to this value. So people are willing to pay about 13,000 euros per hectare per year in order to conserve and to restore saltmarsh. This is a summary of all the data, all the value that we collect after these 3 years of research, of modeling, of analyzing data from questionnaire, and so on. We can see that we have a value of 3,000, that is the value that comes from the modeling studies. We have an economic values of 13,000 euros per hectare per year that comes from the willingness to pay question. And then we have a value of 11,000, 12,000 euros per hectare per year that comes from benefit transfer method. We can see that the willingness to pay value resulting from our surveys is very close to the average value of all the ecosystem services from coast and wetlands found in literature. So we decided to choose the value assessed from the willingness to pay method because it was the most complete, because it included all the ecosystem services and the most connected to the specific saltmarsh ecosystem, to the Lagoon of Venice. So this is the final number, that the final value of all the ecosystem services offered by the saltmarshes of the Lagoon of Venice. 13,000 euros per hectare per year. With this value, we did the cost-benefit analysis. So basically, we calculate the benefit of the restoration of 1 hectare of saltmarsh. That is the sum of all the values of ecosystem services provided by 1 hectare of restored saltmarsh. About 13,000 euros per hectare per year. We compared this value with the cost to protect and restore degraded saltmarshes using the Live-Mine approach would amount to about 1,430 euros per hectare per year. In this case, the benefit is more than the cost, and we can see that the ratio is 9.5. So this means that every euro invested in shoreline protection, in the saltmarsh protection, provides about 9.5 euros in monetary benefits. This is the main result of our research and the application of cost-benefit analysis to the real case of the Live-Mine project, that is a natural conservation project. This, the important fact is that this cost-benefit analysis has been really used to demonstrate the sustainability of the project, and it was a decision support tool that help decision makers to evaluate the project and to decide to continue it. So, in conclusion, let me sum up my main points. We can see that ecosystem services valuation is a decision support tool to be used in ecosystem management. We have, as an environmental engineer, one more argument to the environmental protection. It is becoming more and more important across the scientific and policy field. For example, it was required, but I hope that it will be required again in the new European biodiversity strategy. And it is the base for the establishment of incentive or market-based mechanism. So there are a lot of future challenges, of course. For example, the valuation accuracy. There is a need for deeper integration between economy and ecology, and there is a need of a deeper integration of ecosystem services in the policy decisions. Okay. So I finished. If you have any questions, you can write me or you can write to Professor Palmeri. These are some references, some papers that you can read. And nothing else. Thank you for your attention and good luck for your career as environmental engineer.
Thank you very much, Laura. There are any questions about the topic proposed by Laura? No questions. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
I want to ask why there is this phenomenon of erosion of this salt marsh.
Yes, it is both for natural causes, but also anthropogenic causes. So, because of the velocity of boats, the hydrodynamics of the lagoon that was completely different from 1 century ago. There weren't so many channels. Now there are a lot of channels that changes the hydrodynamic, and artificial channels that changes the hydrodynamic of the lagoon and of the sediments. The boats that are with the motors that produces waves on the impact on the saltmarsh edges. So there are a lot of causes. that are most of the causes are irreversible. So
Yes, I recall you that la Serenissima, Venezia, Repubblica di Venezia, aveva spostato tutti i canali che scaricavano in laguna per questioni di controllo dell'idrografia, dell'idrologia lagunare. E questo ha avuto come conseguenza che si è diminuita in maniera significativa l'apporto di solidi da parte del bacino scolante in laguna. Questo unito al fatto che sta cambiando il clima, si stanno alzando i livelli del mare e soprattutto sta cambiando anche l'ecologia lagunare, alcune specie che una volta avevano la capacità di conservare, come dire, consolidare le balene, che non sono più in grado di fare questo lavoro, e di conseguenza il movimento dell'acqua che entra e esce dalla laguna causa questi fenomeni di erosione. Sorry for the non-Italian speaking. It is too complicated to say it in English now. Any other questions? Va bene, Laura, ti ringrazio moltissimo.
di niente, grazie a te Luca. Ci vediamo alla prossima.
Ci vediamo alla prossima. For the students, I recall you that we will not have lecture next Tuesday. Instead, we will have a next lecture will be next Thursday. Look at the calendar, please. And next Thursday will be Alessandro Manzardo that will hold a seminar on voluntary tools for managing ecosystems. Okay, now I close the class, and if you need some further clarification, please write me. Va bene Laura, ti ringrazio moltissimo.
Di niente Luca, dai, speriamo di vederci presto.
Vederci presto. Alla prossima.
Dai, ciao, bacione.